ADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar and Accra, 7 p.m. in Abuja and Port Novo. Good evening and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. Here are the top stories. Nigeria's EFCC arrests former officials of National Petroleum Company over alleged $7 billion fraud. The government of Senegal repatriates 50 of its citizens from Iran to Turkey amid missiles strike between Iran and Israel. Opposition parties in Togo denounce irregularities ahead of July municipal elections and calls for mass protests.
On
the UNRR 21 list, we noticed that there is a member of the CLR who is also a member of the UNRR and on the 21 list. It's a fragile violation of the law.
And Chadian opposition leader Success Masra begins hunger strike from his prison cells. Details of these stories and more coming up shortly.
Christopher Aticho with Newslink.
We're glad for your time, and Newslink begins in Nigeria, where a former Chief Financial Officer, CFO of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, NNPCL, Umar Issa, along with several other officials, have been arrested in connection with an alleged $7.2 billion fraud related to the rehabilitation of the Kaduna, Warri, and Port Harcourt refineries. These arrests were made by operatives of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC. The officials involved managed by key NNPCL projects and are currently under investigations for alleged abuse of office, corruption, and diversion of funds. Francis Boniface completes the story.
As the Chief Financial Officer of the NNPCL, Umar Issa was responsible for releasing funds for the turnaround maintenance of the 3 refineries. He, along with key officials involved in the maintenance of the refineries and other significant projects of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, is being investigated for alleged abuse of office, corruption, fund diversion, and receiving kickbacks from contractors. Also in custody of the EFCC is Jimo Olasunkomi, a former managing director of the Warri refinery. Other officials involved in the investigation include Tunde Bakare, the managing director of the Warri refinery, Hamed Diko, a former managing director of the Port Harcourt refinery, and Ibrahim Onoja, another former managing director of the Port Harcourt refinery. Last week, the Senate Committee on Public Accounts, chaired by Aliyu Wadada, raised concerns regarding discrepancies amounting to trillions of naira in the audited financial statements of the NNPCL. The committee described these revelations as alarming and troubling. The committee emphasized that the concerns arise directly from an analysis of NNPCL's audited financial statements from 2017 to 2023. They subsequently provided the NNPCL finance team with a list of 11 queries and instructed them to respond within 1 week.
Francis Boniface filed the report. Meanwhile, as climate challenges mount across Africa, the Nigerian government is doubling down on its commitment to sustainable infrastructure and climate resilience. At a high-level stakeholders engagement and global news conference held on Tuesday in Abuja, officials spotlighted preparations for the landmark summit that would shape the continent's climate future. Yachenu Sasetu has more in this report.
The federal government has reaffirmed its commitment to addressing climate change with renewed focus on infrastructure that supports sustainability. Representing the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Senator George Akume, the Permanent Secretary for Political and Economic Affairs, Nandugu Gajere, said Nigeria is prioritizing resilience through strategic collaboration.
Africa must be positioned not as a passive recipient of solutions, but as an active architect of its own sustainable development.
A key part of this strategy is the Africa Infrastructure and Climate Change Investment Summit, AICIS 2025, now scheduled to take place from August 11 to 14 in Abuja. Chairman of the Summit's Planning Committee, Moses Owaru, described AICIS as a pivotal platform to bring together stakeholders across sectors, from governments and private investors to civil society and the UN system.
Our engagement today serves
three strategic purposes. One, to brief the global and local media on the goal, structure, and expected impact of AIC 2025.
With its four core pillars, green infrastructure, climate resilience, gender inclusion, and bankable investment partnerships, AICIS 2025 hopes to move beyond dialogue into action. Owaro said the summit will focus on mobilizing both multilateral and bilateral financing, ensuring that Africa does not just adapt to climate change, but leads the way in resilient and inclusive development. For WADR, Yechenisa Setu in Abuja.
The government of Senegal has repatriated 50 of its citizens from Iran to Turkey. The move comes in response to the ongoing war between Iran and Israel as the government seeks to protect its citizens from being caught in the crossfire. The evacuation exercise includes diplomatic personnel as well as several citizens volunteers. The Senegal's Minister of African Integration and Foreign Affairs, Yassine Fall, announced this initiative on the sidelines of the 67th ECOWAS Summit held on Sunday in Abuja, Nigeria. Minister Fall explained that the Senegalese citizens travel overland to Turkey because Iranian airspace is currently closed. She also noted that Senegal is the second African country to implement a structured repatriation mechanism. The Senegalese ambassador to Turkey made arrangements to ensure all repatriated citizens were properly accommodated. A second group of citizens is expected to join them in the coming days and will be flown back to Dakar on a scheduled flight. Still in Senegal, the country's Ministry of Finance released two reports on Monday regarding the execution of the country's budget. The reports covered the end of 2024 and the beginning of 2025. Progress has been noted in terms of budgetary mobilization in 2024. However, cautious execution was also noted for this current year. Augustine Colley completes the story.
According to the Senegalese Ministry of Finance, the fourth quarter of 2024 saw the mobilization of just over 4,000 billion CFA francs. This achievement was supported by rising tax revenues. During the first quarter of 2025, over 1 billion CFA francs were raised. The report revealed that regarding expenditure, the fourth quarter of 2024 totaled over 6 billion 500 CFA francs. However, 2025 saw a more cautious budget execution with only nearly 1,500 billion CFA francs spent. It further stated that ordinary expenditures dominated, with expenditures exceeding 1,130,000 CFA francs. Regarding debt, just over 225 billion CFA francs were spent, which remains low in the eyes of many observers. Meanwhile, virtually zero execution was observed, or 0.86%. The Senegalese authorities now intend to address several challenges to strengthen the country's economy, including an acceleration of public investments, but also an improvement in external resources and rigorous debt management.
Augustine Colley filed the report.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
To some political matters now in Togo, opposition parties are expressing concerns about irregularities in the ongoing procedures leading to the municipal elections scheduled for July 17, 2025. These parties are specifically criticizing the inclusion of several candidates from the ruling party UNI on the candidate list for the Turn 1 electoral district in the north of the country. They argue that these candidates do not meet the eligibility criteria as outlined in the Togolese Electoral Code. In response to these issues, the political parties have announced plans for a demonstration in the coming days and to ensure their concerns are heard. Sankole Janko has the details in this report.
In a press release issued Monday, the Alliance of Democrats for Integral Development, ADDI, stated that it had noted these irregularities with astonishment. Benjamin Amozouvi is the party's Secretary General.
Sur la liste de UNI, nous avons constaté qu'il y a un membre.
On the UNR Arotoni 1 list, we noticed that there is a member of the CLR, Combat Pugin, who is also a member of the UNRRO and on the 21 list. We also noticed that there is a traditional leader who is not on the list, as well as a high-ranking CNDH official. We took the Supreme Court into account, and after a year, the Supreme Court has given us reason to invalidate the list of UNRRO. But to our great surprise, we found out on June 18 that the Supreme Court has issued another arrest, and in this arrest, the court prohibited the list of UNRRO. I don't understand why the court can rehabilitate this list. It's a fragile violation of the law, and that's why we reacted.
Meanwhile, the opposition political parties, including ADDI, DMP, and ANC, all united as a bloc, are therefore calling for a peaceful demonstration on June 28 to demand the withdrawal of the UNIR Tone 1 list. Benjamin Amozuvi maintains that this planned demonstration will be massive.
We are calling for a demonstration on June 28. We did it together with other lists in competition in the 21 circumscription, including the NC list and the DMP list. And so these three lists are calling for the demonstration on June 28 to protest against this flagrant violation of electoral law.
It should be noted that the planned demonstration coincides with the one already launched on social networks scheduled for June 26, 27 and 28 across several areas in the capital, Lomé.
A report by WADR's Lomé correspondent CV Wadrago and voiced by Sankule Chanko. We take you to Chad, where opposition leader Success Masra is on a hunger strike. The opposition leader denounced his detention following the event in Dakar, which left around 40 people dead. From his cell at the Klosom Remand Center, Success Masra informed his party comrades that he was beginning a hunger strike this Tuesday. In a letter read by his supporters, the leader of the Transformers denounced the extension of his detention. He also protested the charges against him and the government attempt to silence him. As a reminder, Success Masra has now been in detention for 40 days. He was taken to the judiciary police after his arrest on May 16. The opposition leader is being prosecuted for incitement to hatred, murder, and this is in connection with the massacre of some 40 Fulani people in the village of Madakau on May 14, 2025. To some legal matters now in Guinea, lawyers have initiated 2-week boycott for all court hearings and are withdrawing from transitional institutions. This decision was made on Monday, June 23, by the Bar Association in solidarity with their colleague Mohamed Traoré, who was abducted from his home last Saturday by marksmen and was later released. The lawyers have also decided to file a complaint against those responsible for the kidnapping of Traoré, a former president of the bar and former member of the National Transition Council. Abdullahi Hassan completes the story.
While gathering before the Conakry Court of Appeal on Monday, the Guinean lawyers approved a boycott of all hearings and judicial police summons for 2 weeks. The lawyers also decided to withdraw their representatives from all transitional institutions and bodies, including the National Transitional Council, NTC. Malik Jakite is the acting president of the Guinean Bar Association.
The Bureau of Guinea lawyers have adopted the following measures in response to the serious harm done to their profession: a 2-week boycott of all judicial hearings, the immediate withdrawal of all lawyers representing the profession in the institutions and commissions of the transition, including the CNT. We intend to file a complaint against the authors.
Following the General Assembly, all the lawyers converged at the Ministry of Justice to express their concerns. However, according to the spokesperson for the Guinean Bar Association, Gabriel Kamano, the Minister of Justice refused to meet with them.
The minister told us that we need to write him to receive us. Things are now clear that the Minister of Justice has contempt for the bar. We will draw the consequences. What remains clear as Minister of Justice, he needs the bar for the proper functioning of justice. So the resolutions we have taken remain in force. We will test them for 2 weeks. During these 2 weeks, we will convene a new assembly to clear the Athenian conduct.
At the moment, neither the Minister of Justice nor the government spokesperson have commented on this case, which is making headlines in the media and on social networks.
Abdullah Hassan with the details of Chiano Alpha Ibrahim Baude's report from Conakry. Meanwhile, ECOWAS commissioned newly elected President Julius Maada Bio of Sierra Leone is beginning to face demands from citizen groups across the sub-region. The most recent request comes in the form of an open letter sent to President Bio on Monday by a civil society organization in Guinea known as the National Front for the Defense of the Constitution, FNDC. In its letter, the FNDC draws President Bio's attention to the arbitrary kidnapping and forced disappearances of prominent figures in Guinea's civil society, particularly Mamadou Biloba and Oumar Sile, also known as Fonike Menge. The Guinean civil society organization is calling on the new ECOWAS president to intervene and ensure the safety or the safe release of these missing activists who have been reported missing and remain untraceable. Asinye Foriata Kamara is head of the National Front for the Defense of the Constitution, and he spoke with WADR about the communication.
Vous savez, Monsieur Maada Bio est un ancien militaire qui est venu.
You know, Mr. Maada Bio is a former military man who came to power by the JUR and also who has a very high credibility in his country and internationally. He has legitimacy that allows him to act beyond the question of sovereignty, beyond the question of borders, to use his influence, his authority as president in the ECOWAS to ask the Guinean authorities to release Omar Silla, Fonike Menge, Duloba, Habib Marwan, Sadu Nimaga, Usman Nyilui, and many others, and especially all those who are victims of arbitrary removal. Since the removal and forced disappearance of our colleagues until now, we continue to fight and explore the possibilities that the Guinean law and the treaties that our country has signed offer us to be able to call on the decision makers so that we can get the freedom of our colleagues. So we hope that with President Julius Maada Bio will use his credibility and his supranational leadership to bring the Guinean leaders to free our colleagues.
Asenye Foriata Kamara is the head of CSO's FNDC in Guinea. You're still listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM from Dakar, Senegal, and around the world on wadr.org. We're also live on Facebook at WADR English Service, as well as YouTube at WADR News. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Nigeria's EFCC arrests former officials of National Petroleum Company over alleged $7 billion fraud. The government of Senegal repatriated 50 of its citizens from Iran to Turkey amid missiles strike between Iran and Israel. Opposition parties in Togo denounce irregularities ahead of July municipal elections and call for mass protests. And Chadian opposition leader Success Masra begins hunger strike from his prison cells. We do have the guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, has approved a final 2-year extension of its military mission in the Gambia, also known as ECOMEC. The decision was reached during the 67th ordinary session of the ECOWAS Heads of State and Government held in Abuja, Nigeria. In a communique, the leaders praised ECOMEC's role in supporting the Gambia security and defense reforms and directed ECOWAS Commission to revise the mission's mandate to improve its effectiveness. They also commended the Gambia's ongoing commitment to its security sector reform program and called for a phased withdrawal plan and a clear exit strategy for the mission, originally deployed in 2017 to restore order after former President Yahya Jammeh refused to leave office. ECOMEC has played a key role in stabilizing the country during its transition. Let's cross over to Liberia, where the president of the West African Bar Association, WABA, Cyril Bono Vama, has highlighted significant challenges to access of justice and democratic governance throughout the sub-region. WABA, which consists of lawyers and national law societies from the region, advocate for the rule of law, human rights and democracy in West Africa. Cyril Varma, who is the president of the Liberian National Bar Association, emphasized the need for proactive measures to tackle these urgent concerns through unified petitions and advocacy efforts. WADR's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
Councillor Bonham Varman emphasized the importance of respecting and adhering to the rulings of the ECOWAS Committee on the Code of Justice. Since its establishment, member states are expected to follow these protocols, which are essential for maintaining legal cohesion within the regional bloc. He warned that ignoring these decisions undermines the regional legal framework and hampers regional integration.
We are concentrated in the West African sub-region to elevate issues around access to justice, democratic consolidation. We are concerned with rulings and decisions emanating from the ECOWAS Committee Code of Justice. The member states must begin to adhere to those rulings and decisions because you all signed on to the protocol in 1975.
Additionally, the president of the West African Bar Association, WABA, expressed concerns about the increasing trend of military coups in the Sahel region. He reaffirmed WABA's commitment to collaborating with affected countries to strengthen democratic institutions and uphold democratic norms. Regarding recent political issues in Ghana, including the suspension of the Chief Justice, Councillor Varma stressed the need to evaluate these actions against constitutional standards.
We are finding a way to remain engaged with those countries to see what can be done to make sure that some of the rural issues that confront the sub-region are addressed. Do it in collaboration with member bar association because they are in those countries. There was an issue recently with the suspension of the Chief Justice in Ghana. We are quite concerned about that.
As part of its mission, the West African Bar Association works in partnership with ECOWAS and utilizes the African Chapter on Human and People's Rights to promote justice, human rights, and democracy throughout the region. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
In Niger, the first session of the Consultative Forum for Refoundation CCR is scheduled to convene on Saturday, June 28, 2025. This decision was made following a decree signed by the President of the Republic, General Abdurrahman Chiani, on Monday, June 23. It is important to note that members of the CCR were appointed by President Chiani on May 1, 2025. They represent various sectors of Nigerian society. And as indicated by its name, the CCR is a consultative body tasked with formulating proposals to rethink the political, economic, and social foundations of Niger.
Politics,
Analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
This evening, our spotlight turns to Togo, a country in the grips of political tension and public outcry. Recent constitutional reforms have triggered a wave of protest across the nation. What began as a legal adjustment has now ignited accusations of the constitutional coup, with many fearing that this could cement President Faure Gnassingbé's grip on power indefinitely. There have been crackdowns and there are planned series of protests in the coming days. With the ongoing situation in the country, this has left people in tense states. To help us make sense out of this really happening, or what is really happening, and what it could mean for democracy in Togo and the wider West Africa region, we are joined by Kopep Dabugat, a civil society engagement expert and international affairs analyst.
The situation of Togo, it's not a new kind of thing. It's something that has, evolved over time. And I think the character of the Togolese political landscape has virtually remained the same, with the same National Republican Union or something like that, the party of Faure Gnassingbé, the president, has been in control of power, absolute control of power for God knows how long? So it's a trend that has been there. But the new aspect that has been added to it is the fact that now, in a very, should I say, smart or bold move, he has moved to perpetuate himself in power as the president of the Council of Ministers, which basically has no term. And this is the position that sort of lays the foundation for the governance policies and everything for the country. That is what has changed. And I think people are just not happy with that. And of course, with the awareness about what has been happening across the world, with the openness that the internet spread and the social media and all that have imposed on societies.
Mr. Cooper,
where people...
Are you worried that Togo is of some sort following this troubling trend of democratic backsliding in West Africa?
Well, I would say yes, because, in a country where substantively now you don't have the right to elect your president. It is a group of people called the Council of Ministers that go there to select, the president. And of course, this group are all, I would say, in the pockets of the president. So there's nothing stopping him from being in power for the next 20 years or even for life, So that is not a free society. That is not a democratic society, especially in a situation whereby majority of the citizens no longer see him as a viable alternative, as a viable option for them as president. You understand? So it's tints of backsliding, even though there are elections. The elections do not even concern the president. You see the funny situation in Togo. How can a serving president be so naive as to believe that taking the power out of people's hands to elect their president will not amount to very high opposition?
Kopep Dabugat is a civil society engagement expert. And it's time for sports, and Augustine Colley joins me. Augustine, what's happening?
All right, good evening, Chris. Former Super Eagles head coach Augustine Owen Agivon has backed the three-time AFCON champions to qualify for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. The 59-year-old, in his fourth stint as the head coach of the Nigerian team, took over after Finidi George relinquished his role as the team's gaffer after two competitive games. Agivon took over and helped the Super Eagles qualify for the 2025 AFCON tournament before Eric Shilly was appointed as the team's head coach. The Super Eagles are currently fourth in their World Cup qualifying group and need to win all their remaining games to stand a chance of playing in the tournament next year. Well, elsewhere, Inter Miami's Lionel Messi faces a tantalizing reunion with former club Paris Saint-Germain in the Club World Cup last 16 after both sides progressed to the knockout phase on Monday in the ongoing FIFA Club World Cup tournament. Miami drew 2-2 with Palmeiras to go through second in Group A after the Brazilians have fought back from 2 goals down to seal top spot. And that's the latest in the world of sports.
Thank you very much, Augustine. And with that, we've come to the end of today's edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Shekinjai for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via our social media platforms, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram at WADR News, and on Facebook at WADR English Service. I am Christopher Aticho. Good evening and enjoy the rest of our broadcasts.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM.